There exists a type of creature in the world that has been discovered by a few people, but has not been confirmed to exist. We collectively refer to this type of creature as unidentified mysterious animal, unconfirmed biological entity, abbreviated as UMA. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the UMA series videos. The Afghanistan War is one of the most severe conflicts of the 21st century. It directly caused a large number of Afghan civilians to be displaced. The land became devastated, and social structures and infrastructure were severely damaged. In this chaotic and disastrous war, bizarre incidents also emerged frequently. A U.S. Special Task Force sent to the desert lost contact with headquarters after completing their mission. It is said they encountered a massive humanoid creature, and this is the topic of this video. During the Afghanistan War, a suspected giant primate was reportedly sighted, the Kandahar Giant. The earliest description of the Kandahar Giant comes from the 2005 book by Steve Quayle, an expert on giant myths, titled Long Walkers: The Return of the Nephilim. However, the content of this book was based on an eyewitness report and was largely fictionalized, so we will skip over this and go straight to the main topic. Coast to Coast is a famous late-night American radio show. It primarily focuses on supernatural events or conspiracy theories as its main topics. Through face-to-face or phone interviews, it discusses various incidents. The show attracted a massive audience, peaking with over 10 million weekly listeners. On December 3, 2008, Steve Quayle discussed his latest research on giants on the show. He suggested that a secret U.S. government organization might be capturing live giants and placing them in a state of suspended animation to study their genetic structure. At the same time, he invited an anonymous U.S. Air Force C-130 pilot, who was one of the aforementioned witnesses, to join the program via call. The pilot claimed that during his service in Afghanistan in 2002, claimed to have transported the body of a massive humanoid creature. At the time, he piloted the aircraft and landed on a mountain in Kandahar. From a distance, he could see the gigantic figure. He described the creature as having red hair, 6 fingers on each hand, and enormous feet, wearing crude shoes seemingly made of canvas. The net used to transport it measured 12 feet in length. After the aircraft took off and the net's weight was deducted, they calculated the creature's weight to be approximately 1,100 pounds, or around 500 kilograms. Judging from its injuries, it had been killed by military firearms. The body was eventually transported to a military base in Ohio. Steve Quayle's book and interview records caught the attention of supernatural researcher L.A. Marzulli. For years, he used his connections to search for potential eyewitnesses. In 2010, he released a supernatural documentary series titled The Watchers Series. After the show aired, director Richard Shaw received an anonymous phone call. The caller claimed that he was one of the U.S. soldiers who had killed the giant. On August 13, 2016, in the latest episode of The Watchers series, Marzulli interviewed this participant, Mr. K. From then on, this bizarre story truly began to unfold in front of the public. In 2002, a U.S. Army patrol stationed in Afghanistan lost contact with their base after completing a mission in a remote mountainous region. During one of the encounters, Mr. K's Special Operations team was dispatched to the area to conduct a search. After a rescue helicopter landed in the region, they began walking toward the target location. Along the way, they repeatedly called out to the missing patrol via radio, but received no response. Following a suspicious trail, they turned a corner on a mountain path and suddenly spotted a massive, open cave. The entrance was surrounded by scattered rocks and bones from various creatures. Although they couldn't immediately confirm they were human bones, Mr. K stated he did see remnants of their military communications equipment among them. At the time, they believed the patrol might have been attacked by some kind of animal. The cave entrance, compared to their location, was at a steep drop. The relatively flat ground gave them enough space to deploy and set up defenses. But when the creature charged out of the cave, it shocked everyone. Mr. K described a tall male figure, standing about 12 to 15 feet in height. He had long, fiery red hair and a beard that draped over his shoulders. In both hands, he wielded massive shields, and a weapon resembling a spear. He began advancing toward the team. Everyone was horrified by the terrifying sight. A soldier named Dan was the first to react, charging at the giant and opening fire. The sound of gunfire snapped everyone back to reality, awakening their muscle memory as soldiers. They started pulling their triggers. A hail of bullets did not immediately bring the creature down. It charged into the group, impaling Dan through the chest with its spear. Then it continued to rush toward the others. Over the radio, someone shouted, "Aim for the face! Aim for the face!" The entire team was equipped with M4 assault rifles, Wilson .308 sniper rifles, and Barrett M82 semi-automatic sniper rifles. Mr. K stated that the shooting lasted for a full 30 seconds, before the creature finally fell. During this time, the creature kept moving, and attempting to attack. After the giant was killed, the U.S. Command Center quickly dispatched 2 helicopters, one to transport the giant's body, and one to extract the team. When they worked together to load the body into the net, Mr. K noticed that the creature emitted a strong, pungent stench, like a decaying corpse. Each hand had 6 fingers, with sharp, rough nails, covered in fungus. It also had 2 rows of teeth, one upper and one lower. Afterward, they returned to the base to report the incident. They were quickly informed that they were prohibited from disclosing anything related to this operation. They were required to sign a confidentiality agreement. Mr. K stated on the program that he came forward to reveal the incident because he believed people have the right to know what is happening on this planet. Mr. K was not the only witness. Marzulli stated that he met with Mr. K 3 times to verify the reliability of his testimony. However, on one of his trips to meet him, he discovered that the driver who picked him up was also a retired soldier and had participated in the Afghanistan war. During an interview with Marzulli, this witness, who went by the pseudonym Mr. D, stated that he went to Afghanistan in 2005 and was not a direct eyewitness. After arriving at the base, he began hearing other soldiers discussing the topic. They mentioned that one of their teams had found and killed a person at the entrance of a cave. Initially, he didn't pay much attention to the story, but later, he heard that the person's size was 3 times that of an average human. It had extra fingers and toes compared to a normal person, and was covered in red hair. A special forces unit arrived to take the body away. Mr. E stated that all the soldiers involved in the operation had heard about the incident. However, maintaining secrecy about such missions was second nature to them. It was at this moment that he realized why, during pre-deployment training, they were instructed to aim their rifles higher and to familiarize themselves with combat inside caves. This possibly indicated that the military believed there could be more of these large humanoid creatures in the region. Nick Orton is a current U.S. military logistics officer and also an enthusiast of supernatural phenomena. He compiled a series of supernatural incident reports collected from soldiers and veterans into a book titled Tales from the Grid Square. This book documents 4 additional reports, besides the Kandahar Giant, of encounters with large humanoid creatures in Afghanistan. The first account is from an anonymous U.S. Army squad leader. He stated that during one night in 2008 to 2009, while patrolling in Afghanistan's Kunar province, he used a thermal imaging system to scan the valley. At the top of a hillside, he detected a massive heat signature. The trees in that area ranged from 10 to 12 feet in height, and this creature was taller than the trees. Its speed of movement was astonishing, walking straight along the ridge until it disappeared from view. The second report comes from a U.S. Air Force Reaper drone operator. During a reconnaissance mission in northern Afghanistan, he spotted giants inside a crude hut through the drone's camera. They were approximately 3 to 4 meters tall, wearing very rough clothing and thick cloaks. Goats standing beside them looked like small kittens. The giants showed no erratic behavior. Instead, they appeared to be engaging in everyday chores. The surveillance lasted about 10 minutes before the unit moved out of the drone's range. The other 2 reports were similar to the above incidents, coming from a U.S. Air Force pilot and a former Australian Army member. They each encountered humanoid creatures in the Karangal Valley and Uruzgan province, measuring between 8 and 12 feet tall. Apart from their clothing and size, the behavior of these creatures was otherwise human-like, and showed no difference. Based on the witnesses' descriptions of the Kandahar Giant, there is no known species that matches its characteristics. Currently, there are two popular theories about giants. One suggests that the Kandahar Giant is real, and that the race of giants has always existed in remote areas, where humans rarely venture. To avoid unnecessary panic, the US government and other global powers have deliberately concealed this information. The concept of giants itself has been documented in myths and legends worldwide. Marzulli and Steve Quayle believe that these bizarre reports of giant humanoid sightings could confirm the existence of mythical giants. The Nephilim, the Rephaim, as mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, are described as a race, an unusually large and mysterious group. Genesis 6 contains this description. The Nephilim were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. In Numbers 13, it is mentioned that, when the Israelites were preparing to enter Canaan, they saw the Nephilim living in the land. These people were tall and formidable, making the Israelites feel like grasshoppers in comparison. As of now, most ancient biblical texts suggest that the Nephilim were giants. However, there are other interpretations that propose the term Nephilim comes from the Hebrew word for fallen. In this context, the sons of God refer to fallen angels, making the Nephilim a group of fallen beings. Of course, the Bible's description of the Nephilim is quite ambiguous. Such interpretations, which verge on the supernatural, or delve into theology and religious beliefs, are areas I am not deeply familiar with, and cannot elaborate on further. However, I personally find this explanation a bit far-fetched. Based on the information I've gathered, both Marzulli and Steve, as well as others mentioned earlier, are devout Christians. Therefore, in this theory, personal biases may inevitably come into play. Another theory, however, is entirely different. It suggests that these bizarre and untraceable reports during wartime were actually disseminated by officials to reduce the sensitivity of certain war-related reports. Some observant netizens noticed that these strange stories came to an end when the US military withdrew in late August 2021. Therefore, this was undoubtedly a psychological warfare tactic by the US military. From my personal perspective, putting aside the US military's psychological operations and looking solely at the descriptions of the event, I believe there is a possibility that the Kandahar Giant exists. However, logic tells me that the likelihood is not very high. If it does exist, it would only be based on the shared presence of giants in mythology, and this inevitably reminds one of the giant skeleton discoveries of the 19th century. At that time, news of lost giant skeletons being discovered spread across the globe. Hundreds of newspapers, stories of giant remains being discovered were reported. Although some scholars were skeptical about the so-called giant discoveries, most readers believed this was historical evidence recorded in the Bible. Strangely, when we now try to trace the whereabouts of these skeletons, we find that almost all the samples have disappeared under the claim of being lost. Of course, there were also confirmed false reports among them, such as the Cardiff Giant incident of 1869, which was purely a commercial hoax, manufactured for profit. It wasn't until 1934 that Smithsonian Institution anthropologist Alesh Hrdlicka officially debunked the idea of giant bones, stating that people were often deceived by unusually large femurs because they were not familiar with human anatomy. However, some scholars argue that the Smithsonian Institution deliberately hid the giant skeletons and suppressed the information. Now, if we solely look at the eyewitness reports of the Kandahar Giant, upon carefully reviewing these descriptions, you will notice that all the events lack critical and specific timeline details. Additionally, the US military's control over information secrecy is very strict. It is not as prone to leaks as described online. Content that personnel are allowed to release has specific permissions. However, sensitive information is inaccessible to the general public. As for Marzulli, being a paranormal researcher, a writer, and a video creator, If information about giants were truly suppressed, I don't believe he would have been able to easily present interviews to the audience in documentary form. Moreover, mystery creatures and urban legends related to the military have always been immensely popular. It's reasonable to suspect that these stories are fabricated. On August 31, 2016, Los Angeles journalist Bethania Palma published an article on Snopes, a website dedicated to fact-checking. The article stated that they had contacted the Department of Defense to inquire about the giants. The response they received was, "We have no records or information regarding Special Forces members killing a giant in Kandahar." Furthermore, although the web page has been deactivated, the press release section on the Department of Defense website listed all military casualties during the war. In 2002, the only soldier named Dan, or Daniel who died, was killed along with 3 others in an explosive ordnance disposal accident. So overall, the key information about the Kandahar Giant does not hold up. Of course, this is just a conclusion I've drawn from my personal perspective. Perhaps there really are some giant primates on Earth that we are unaware of. It's just that our current understanding is limited by what is already known. After all, the unknown is always greater than the known. This is the charm of UMA. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.